Hi class, in this video, I'm going to go over our assignment, instructional models and strategies analysis. So in this assignment, you're going to be reviewing the instructional models that are from our readings this week. And these instructional models are different ways that you can reach your students to adjust your teaching style and additionally for you to be able to present lesson in a way that all students in your class can understand. So let's take a quick look at the template. It has two parts. Part one is the analysis, where you're going to define each instructional model. So you'll see, here's our template, and they give you an instructional model here in our first column. And then you need to write a description of what that instructional model is. And so under the description, what are those defining characteristics of that model? So I'd like for you to use the lecture or the book that I have for this week. My lecture matches what's in the book if you are more of a visual learner or it's easier for you to understand things when it's presented to you. I highly recommend you watch that lecture for this week because I go over each of those models. So kind of explain what that model is to me, not kind of, don't just say, oh, it helps kids learn this way, but just tell me what it is. What are those steps of the model? Like what happens in each of the models? For example, vocabulary acquisition is a specific way to present vocabulary to students. It's focused on Greek and Latin roots. It's focused on the sound spelling correlation. And there's specific steps within that model. It's not just learning vocabulary words. So in your description area, I do want you to detail what that looks like. Please cite your references from where you're getting information there. And then provide an example that clearly paints a picture of what it looks like in practice. So you want to demonstrate that you understand this model, and the more the detail, the better. So for vocabulary acquisition, you might be explaining how students would first start by defining the words from their science lesson on light and sound, for example. And maybe they start by defining the word sound wave. And then, wait, oh, that wouldn't work in this model. Sound wave is not going to be one that works. Remember, I just said it was based on Greek and Latin roots. So the words for the vocabulary acquisition model would matter. That wouldn't be a good example where a vocabulary word that did have a sound spelling correlation would be a better example. Um, for example, biology, which has, bio, which means life, ology, which means the study of, and that helps me understand biology means the study of life. And so you give an example of what you would do with that word biology. Students would start by step one, defining the word. Step two, then they would do this. So you can show that you understand the vocabulary acquisition model and the components of it. So you'll give specific examples here. And then how in general does this strategy support the needs of diverse students? So on the class profile, you'll see an example class. You'll be using this class profile throughout your program, and you'll be able to see that we have some students with different needs in our class here. This is our example class. So we have some students who wear glasses, some students who are below reading, some students who are on level and above. Same with math, some below, on, and above level. We have some students who are language learners. It shows their ELL proficiency levels. Fours and fives. So fives are more proficient, where fours are intermediate. And then like ones and twos are those students who are at the basic levels. So you can see most students in the class are more intermediate level, um, where we do have um, some students who are not at all. Um, not at all English language learners, but most of the students are intermediate, so they speak English. They just don't have all of the academic language, and they might need just a little bit of language support, but not translations per se. So this is our class profile. And how does each of these support those diverse needs on the class profile? So because there's a range of needs in the classroom, like what does direct instruction do to support different learners? A common misconception I see students have when they do this assignment is they say, how can I support diverse students when doing direct instruction? But that's not what it's asking. It's how does direct instruction support diverse students? And so you could talk about how, well, the teacher models the lesson and that helps all students understand it before they have to try it themselves. And in this column specifically, using citations and scholarly sources is going to be important because you need to know how does direct instruction support those learners. So that's part one, the analysis. On part two, you're going to have application. So now we're going back to the same standard objective and that I wrote in week 2, refining along the way based on your feedback from each assignment. Because what we're doing is we're slowly building a lesson plan. You've already made your standard, chosen your standard, you wrote objectives, then you wrote assessments. Now we're going to talk about different things we can do to teach this standard. So this week you're taking that same standard and you are saying, now here are different ways I can teach it. So you're going to give an explanation of the model or strategy that you would teach with your standard from topic 2. And then why is it effective strategy and so in supporting both students' learnings and the teaching of that standard and objective, supporting this with 2 to 3 scholarly sources. So back to the template. You're gonna bring over that grade level standard, including the description. I need to see it, you need to see it, we both need to see it so you can make sure everything is properly aligned to that standard. Your objective refined based on the feedback you received on any previous assignments. And then over here, if you can name what strategy you're doing. And you have to think about, is this strategy good for this standard? So for example, direct instruction would be a great strategy for teaching uh, phonics or math or something like that. I'm going to first model it for them, and then we do some together, and then they go and work independently. Then you go back up to your strategies and you might say, oh, vocabulary, that's good. They need to know vocabulary when they do phonics. The problem you might encounter is for this standard, are there any sound spelling correspondences? Are there any Greek or Latin roots? Is this strategy good for kindergartners, or is this more higher level strategy? So you have to consider which strategies are good for specific students, ages, and standards. I would not use this strategy for phonics. So I would choose something different. Cooperative learning, for example, might be a great way to teach phonics. So I would choose that one down here, write it. Now, when you give the explanation, you need to be detailed and make it specific to that standard you chose. So if we chose a standard that was about teaching the sounds um, of like ow and o, then I would explain that here. So when I choose my learning objective, I can get more specific. I can say, okay, they might have a phonics standard where they're learning how to decode ow and o sound spellings. Now I'm going to explain. So I'm going to model direct instruction. I'm going to model how to read the ow and o sounds. I'm going to explain to students how they it's a vowel pair and they only make one sound. I'm going to read several words, then I'm going to have students practice reading words with me, and then they're going to go work and do a word sort independently. That's what would go in the explanation box. In the rationale blocks, now you're going to explain why this direct instruction strategy is good for teaching this standard to these students. And that's where the profile comes in. Because I do have quite a few English language learners, students would benefit from learning this strategy because they'll be able to hear it and see it first before they have to practice reading it, bring in some scholarly sources, and explain why this is a good strategy for this standard and these students. So it's not just about the learners in the classroom, but why is it a good strategy? If I'm trying to explain that vocabulary acquisition model, it wouldn't be a good strategy for this standard because there are no Greek or Latin roots or sound spelling correspondences in the ow, o words they're learning right now because they're maybe say, smaller words, shorter words. You can't really analyze the meaning of it. So this isn't the best strategy for this standard. Additionally, I wouldn't be teaching the meaning of the vocabulary when I'm just trying to learn how to read words. The purpose of that lesson would be to code, to not to specifically understand what all of the meaning of the words are. So you'll choose 3 models or strategies, explain it and how you would teach it step by step, and then give a rationale for why this is a good strategy for this standard and these students. Please always read this rubric before submitting because this is how I grade you. You can see you'll get points for the description, examples, and how it supports students' needs in part 1 for all of the strategies. And then in part 2, you'll be graded on each strategy. And then finally, documenting your sources is important. Please, if you're not confident with using APA style, please refer to those help guides in Microsoft Word and Google Docs on how to do APA because there are tools in there that do all of the work for you. You don't have to know how to do it yourself. The computer will auto-generate it when you feed it the information it needs. You just need to know how to use those tools. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out.